I still remember the exact moment my marriage ended. Not with a scream, not with a slammed door, but with the quiet horror of discovery. I was standing in our walk-in closet, holding one of William's dress shirts between trembling fingers. On the pristine white cotton was a stain of lipstick so crimson it glared at me under the soft yellow light. A surgeon's shirt, he had said. An emergency surgery that went late into the night. But no operating room in the world used that shade of red. My heart knew the truth before my mind could catch up. My husband's betrayal wasn't speculation, it was evidence that burned into my eyes and seared my chest. 15 years of marriage condensed into that single moment, collapsing around me, like a crystal chandelier hitting marble. William Carter, the brilliant cardiac surgeon with steady hands who saved lives daily, was not just my husband and the father of our 3 children. He was also the man who came home each night to my cooking, who let me plan our anniversaries, who smiled at fundraisers and told the world, "Jennifer makes it all possible." And yet hidden beneath his polished shoes and perfect reputation was this truth. He had another woman's lips on his clothes, another life carefully tucked away in lies. I wanted to scream to throw the shirt in his face, but instead I folded it neatly as though denial could sew the rip back into the fabric of my life. The irony was unbearable. To the outside world, we were the Carters, the model of a successful medical family. Him, the celebrated surgeon, me, the devoted wife who managed our colonial home in Oakdale Heights, raised 3 children, hosted fundraisers, and kept the dream alive. The American dream, everyone said. But dreams are fragile things, and mine was cracking thread by thread. Looking back now, I should have seen it. The late nights at the hospital, the weekends he claimed to spend golfing with colleagues, the way our conversations turned transactional schedules, bills, children's activities stripped of intimacy. When he was promoted to chief of cardiac surgery, I threw him a surprise party, desperate to celebrate the man I believed I still knew. In public, he kissed my cheek and thanked me. In private, he told me I'd embarrassed him. That night, he didn't sleep in our bed. I told myself it was stress, that the weight of saving lives explained the distance in his eyes when he looked at me. But now, holding that shirt, I knew better. The unraveling didn't stop there. A week later, while preparing a surprise anniversary trip to Napa Valley, I glanced at his phone to check his calendar. Just a quick peek, I told myself. One text lit up the screen. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to feel you again. When are you leaving her?" The name above the message was Rebecca Harrington, a colleague, a woman I had welcomed into our home. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Thread after thread unraveled as I scrolled, finding months of messages, pictures, laughter at my expense. "She still thinks you care about anniversaries," Rebecca had written. Poor thing. I made his coffee the next morning as usual, kissed him goodbye as he left for the hospital, and then collapsed over the kitchen sink, my body racked with sobs until I vomited bile. It wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. He had laughed at my love, mocked my devotion, while I was carrying the weight of our family alone. That night when I confronted him, I expected denial. Instead, he looked me in the eye and admitted everything, his voice like a scalpel cutting through what little hope I had left. "Yes, I'm with Rebecca. I want a divorce." The coldness in his tone shattered me more than his words. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. "I've outgrown us," he said, as if 15 years of marriage and 3 children were nothing more than a worn-out suit he was discarding. I stared at him, the man I had sacrificed my career, for the man I had nursed through failures and celebrated through triumphs. And he sneered, "I save lives every day. What do you do? Jennifer, bake cookies, organize my socks." That night he slept in the guest room. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if any of it had ever been real. By morning, a business card from his lawyer sat on the counter as casually placed as if it were a grocery list. My life was ending not with rage, but with bureaucracy. Yet I didn't know then that this wasn't just about an affair. William's betrayal ran deeper, darker into the very foundation of our family. And the truth waiting to surface would make lipstick stains and secret texts seem like child's play. I thought the worst had already happened. I thought losing his love was the deepest cut. But in reality, I hadn't even seen the knife he had hidden for years, waiting to pierce me in ways I never imagined. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, whispered phone calls, and a house that suddenly felt more like a stranger's museum than a home. Every photo on the walls mocked me family portraits, where his hand rested on my shoulder vacations, where our smiles looked genuine Christmas mornings, where he wore the sweater I'd knit with my own hands. They weren't memories anymore. They were evidence of my foolishness. William moved out within 2 weeks into an apartment conveniently close to the hospital. He didn't bother hiding that Rebecca was there. The kids were confused, broken in ways I couldn't mend with bedtime stories or soft lullabies. Our eldest, Hannah, 14, stopped looking him in the eye. Michael, 12, simmered with silent rage, while little Claire kept asking why Daddy wasn't coming home for dinner. I tried to hold us together, but it felt like trying to stitch up a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. One night, after the children were asleep, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the dining table alone. My reflection in the glass was a ghost. The Jennifer I knew, warm, patient, devoted, was gone. In her place was a woman who had been gutted and left to rot. And then the phone rang. It was Rebecca. I almost didn't answer, but the rage in me was louder than reason. I pressed the phone to my ear, my voice shaking. "Why are you calling me?" Her laugh was sharp, venomous. "Because I thought you should know, Jennifer. He never loved you. He told me you were just convenient, a babysitter, a maid, not a wife." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. Then why call to rub salt in the wound? Because she purred, "He's mine now. And soon so is everything else." I hung up before my scream could escape. My heart pounded in my chest, fury drowning grief. She wanted to humiliate me, to erase me. And William, he had given her permission to. But her arrogance had sparked something in me, something I thought betrayal had killed the will to fight. I hired a lawyer the next day, one sharper than any scalpel William had ever held. We filed for divorce, and I demanded full custody. William scoffed, waving his reputation around like a shield. "You think a judge will side with you over me? I save lives every day. You have no career, no income." His words burned, but I held my ground. It was during one of those late-night strategy sessions with my lawyer that a thought slipped into my mind, uninvited but persistent. For years, whispers had haunted me. Comments from William's colleagues, odd looks, timelines that didn't add up. And when I stared at my children, I noticed little details. I had long ignored Michael's hazel eyes, so different from ours. Claire's curls a shade too dark. I had brushed them off before because love doesn't question. But now betrayal demanded answers. I ordered a DNA test, not just for me but for the children. I told myself it was paranoia, that the results would prove what I already knew, that they were his, that at least his love for them had been real. But deep down, a cold dread coiled in my stomach, whispering truths I wasn't ready to face. The results arrived in a plain envelope, the kind that could contain bills or invitations. My hands shook as I tore it open. Line after line of scientific data blurred through my tears until I found the words that gutted me worse than any affair ever could. Probability of paternity, 0%. Michael wasn't his son. I gasped so loudly I woke Claire from her nap upstairs. My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor, the paper clutched to my chest like a death notice. The walls spun. Memories collided: William's pride in Michael's little league games, his scolding when homework was late, his coldness that seemed sharper toward Michael than the others. Had he known? Had he suspected all along? And then a darker thought struck me. If he didn't know, how would he use this when he found out? The betrayal had layers I hadn't yet peeled back. The affair was only the surface. What waited below was a family secret buried so deep it threatened to crush us all. I don't know how long I sat on that floor, clutching the DNA report, the paper crumpling beneath my fingers, as though destroying it could erase the truth it carried. My son, my sweet, headstrong Michael, was not William's. The words throbbed in my skull louder than my own heartbeat. I wanted to vomit, to scream, to claw my way out of the nightmare that had become my life. But then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Michael's voice, groggy but curious. "Mom, are you okay?" His eyes, hazel and full of worry, looked down at me. And for the first time, I didn't just see my boy, I saw the storm his existence was about to unleash. He had no idea the paper in my hand held a truth that could shatter him. I forced a smile, swallowing the sob that clawed at my throat. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired." I folded the paper and slipped it into a drawer before he could ask more. I hugged him so tight his little body squirmed, and I whispered a silent promise. "Whatever happens, I will protect you." The next days were agony. Every time I looked at William strutting into court with Rebecca smirking by his side, I wanted to throw the report in his face. But I hesitated, because the truth wasn't just a weapon, it was also a bomb. And if I dropped it, I couldn't control what pieces of our lives it would obliterate. It was during a custody mediation session that the dam finally broke. William sat across the table, his lawyer oozing arrogance as he listed all the reasons I was unfit. No steady income, too emotional, dependent on his finances. Rebecca sat behind him, her red lips curved in a poisonous smile. My lawyer tried to argue, but the smirk on William's face told me he believed he had already won. And then something inside me snapped. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and slid it across the table. My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. "You want to question my fitness as a mother? Maybe you should question yourself as a father." William's smugness faltered. He tore open the envelope, scanning the lines. His face drained of color. This can't be right," he stammered. His lawyer leaned over, eyes widening as the reality sank in. Rebecca's smile evaporated, her confidence crumbling like ash. "Michael isn't yours," I said, the words slicing through the room. "And you know what that means. All your arguments about being the better parent, the more stable parent, collapse right here. Because biology isn't the only measure of family. Love is, and Michael is mine." The silence was deafening. For once, William had no words. His lawyer scrambled. Rebecca glared, but none of it mattered. The power had shifted. The mediator cleared her throat, her tone cautious. "This changes things significantly. Custody will need to be reconsidered." William's eyes burned into me, fury and humiliation twisting his face. "Who?" he spat, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who is his father?" I met his gaze without flinching. "Not you, and that's all that matters." That night I sat in my bedroom alone, the DNA report on the nightstand like a sentinel. I hadn't answered his question because the truth was more complicated than he could ever understand. Michael's biological father was a ghost from my past, a man I had loved before William swept into my life, before choices and mistakes tangled my future. But William would never use that truth to hurt my son. I would make sure of it. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Because I realized betrayal doesn't always end you. Sometimes it arms you. And William had no idea just how armed I was now. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the end of that week, William's lawyer requested an emergency meeting. His voice was clipped, his eyes darting everywhere but at mine. "Given the complication, my client is willing to negotiate custody differently." The arrogance that once dripped from his every word had evaporated. The great Dr. Carter was cornered not by scalpels or surgeons, but by the truth he could never undo. Rebecca didn't come with him this time. I imagined their fights behind closed doors, her accusing him, raging, both realizing the perfect image they'd built together was already crumbling. Part of me wanted to savor it, to lean into the satisfaction of watching them squirm. But another part, the mother in me, knew I couldn't let bitterness dictate every step. My children needed stability more than I needed revenge. Still, when William tried to regain control by sneering across the table, "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you think that makes you a better mother?" I didn't flinch. I leaned forward and whispered, "No, William. What makes me a better mother is that I've never abandoned my children, and I never will." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. For once, silence was my victory. At home, Michael noticed the tension even if I didn't explain. He lingered near me more, hovering like he was afraid I might vanish too. One night, as I tucked him into bed, he asked quietly, "Am I the reason Dad doesn't love us anymore?" My heart shattered, but I held his face in my hands and said, "No, baby. You are the reason I keep fighting. You are perfect, and nothing can change that. He nodded, but I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes. A doubt I swore I would spend my life erasing. Weeks turned into months. The divorce dragged on ugly and raw, but the DNA test had shifted the battlefield. My lawyer used it not as a weapon against William, but as proof of his hypocrisy. He had called me unfit, mocked me for being just a homemaker, but the truth showed who had really betrayed this family. Judges don't take kindly to fathers who abandon children and then discover one isn't biologically theirs. In the end, custody was mine. Full custody. William fought, of course, but the fight was hollow. Even Rebecca distanced herself once the scandal began to taint his golden reputation at the hospital. She had wanted the perfect surgeon, the perfect future, the man untouchable in his success. What she got was a man exposed, unraveling, and bitter. The day the papers were signed, I walked out of the courthouse with my head high. Hannah slipped her hand into mine. Michael hugged my waist, and little Claire skipped beside us, oblivious to the storm we had just survived. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from William, but from the illusion I had clung to for so long. That night, I gathered the children at the table. No lies, no more pretending. I told them that love isn't measured in DNA, or in titles, or in the approval of someone who can't see your worth. Family, I said, my voice trembling, but steady, is built on who shows up, who stays, who loves you without conditions. And that's what we have now. Just us. And it's enough. As their little faces lit with relief, I realized something profound. The DNA test that could have destroyed me had instead set me free. Betrayal had burned my life down to ash, but from those ashes, I was building something stronger. A home not defined by William's lies, but by the love I poured into every moment with my children. I thought back to the lipstick stain, the cruel text messages the night he told me I was nothing but convenient, and I almost laughed, because standing there in my rebuilt life, I finally saw the truth. I was never his convenience. I was his foundation, and he had torn it away with his own hands. Now I would rise from the rubble, not for him, but for myself and for the 3 hearts that still beat beside mine. The weeks after the custody ruling felt like stepping into sunlight after years of storm. The house was quieter without William's presence, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. We started new traditions, small at first. Friday night pizza on the living room floor, Saturday morning walks at the park, family art projects where Hannah sketched, Claire painted, and Michael, ever the perfectionist, organized supplies with military precision. Our home no longer echoed with his absence. It pulsed with our survival. But peace doesn't erase scars. Sometimes I'd wake in the night, my body tense, convinced I'd hear William's key in the lock. Other times, grief would sneak in when I least expected it, like folding laundry and finding one of his old t-shirts I'd missed in the purge. Rage bubbled too, especially when I overheard whispers at school events. Some parents still saw William as the hero surgeon, not the man who'd abandoned his family. I learned to hold my head higher, not lower. Truth doesn't always travel fast, but it always outlives lies. One evening, Hannah found me staring at the DNA report I had tucked away in a drawer. She sat beside me, her voice hesitant. "Mom, does Michael know?" My breath caught. I had wrestled with that question every day since the results arrived. He was only 12. How much truth could a boy bear? "Not yet," I whispered. "One day when he's older, when he's ready. But right now, what he needs to know is that he is loved, and that's the only truth that matters." Hannah nodded, her eyes brimming with a wisdom beyond her years. "Then that's what we'll make sure he feels every day." And she was right. We poured love into Michael so fiercely that even in his darkest moments of doubt, he would never question where he belonged. Love became the thread stitching us back together, stronger than before. William tried once to claw his way back into relevance. He showed up unannounced on Michael's birthday holding a shiny new bike, as if gifts could erase his absence. Michael looked at him with a mix of longing and resentment, then walked over to me and said, "Can we go inside now, Mom?" The bike sat on the driveway untouched. William's face crumpled, but I didn't gloat. I simply closed the door, knowing this was the bed he had made. Months later, I heard Rebecca had left him. The scandal at the hospital had stained his reputation. Promotions were rescinded, colleagues distanced themselves. The man who once sneered that I was just a homemaker was now the subject of whispers, his perfect facade shattered. Karma doesn't always arrive on schedule, but it never misses its destination. As for me, I began to rediscover the woman I had lost. I returned to school, finishing the degree I had abandoned when I married William. I built a small business from my passion for design, working late nights after the kids were asleep, fueled not by desperation, but by purpose. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Michael looked up from his plate and asked Mom, "Are we going to be okay now?" I reached across, took his hand, and smiled through tears. "We already are, sweetheart. We already are." And I realized then that the DNA test, the paper I thought would destroy everything, had instead handed me the gift of clarity. It stripped away illusions, exposed betrayals, and left only the core of what mattered: love, resilience, and truth. If you are listening to my story, maybe you've carried scars of betrayal too. Maybe you've been laughed at, dismissed, or left behind. Hear me, the people who betray you cannot define you. Only you can decide who you become. So if my journey resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength, I ask you to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And please leave a comment with your story, because every voice deserves to be heard.